everyone. My name is Yuna from CaLex. It's our honor to have you here to join us for this My American Story event to celebrate AAPI Month. AAPI Month is a nationwide celebration to honor the rich history, contributions, and cultures of Asian American and Pacific Islanders. This is our third event, but this is our very first in-person event for American Story. This event is hosted by CaLex, Chinese Americans of Lexington, with many local organizations and town government department, including Lexington Historical Society. The room we have here is provided by them. Lexington Human Rights Committee, Lexington Human Service Department, Lex Pride. We also have a company sponsor, which is Takeda. This is a Japanese multinational pharmaceutical company which has a site in Lexington. We also have our co-sponsor from Lexington local Asian communities, including IAL, Indian Americans of Lexington, BA-Lex, Bangladesh Americans of Lexington, GP-Lex, Japanese Sport Group of Lexington, and CaLex, Korea American Organization of Lexington. The food, the snacks, the delicious snacks, and the regional food are provided by them. Thank you. Let's get started.
Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for attending today. My name is Richard, and I will be a moderator of the event.
I'm Dora, and I will be the other moderator for today. We are so grateful that you have given us the opportunity to illuminate and celebrate Asian American voices.
Historically, Asian and Pacific Islanders' perspectives have been excluded or misrepresented in the American narrative. From the erasure of Chinese railroad workers when they first arrived in the 19th century, to the creation of a harmful model minority myth that endures today.
Now, we are taking back control of the narrative to tell our own stories. Through today's 5 panelists, as well as other speakers, we hope to provide the truest insights into the multifaceted, complex, and colorful nature of our real American stories.
After our panelists share, we will have a brief panel Q&A, where you can ask the panelists questions about their experience.
We hope you enjoy the event. First, to start us off, I'd like to introduce Hamali Shah, a first-generation Indian American and Lexington's Chief Equity Officer, as well as Lexington's former Senior Services Director, to give our opening speech. Ms. Shah?
Ooh, I'm really short. I'm Hamali Shah. I'm the Chief Equity Officer for the town of Lexington. I've been in my role for only 6 months, but I've worked in Lexington for 8 years. I've seen our staff grow to resemble the residents who live in Lexington, so I'm excited to be in my role and advocate for not only our Lexington residents, but our staff as well, in better understanding diversity, equity, and inclusion in the work that we do. As Dora said, I'm first-generation Indian American. I have often struggled to identify myself as South Asian American. My home life was primarily South Asian and my school life American, and it's taken a lot of good and bad experiences for me to say I'm proudly Indian American. It doesn't come very easily. More than my good experiences, I think my bad experiences have really made me accept my Indian American identity. When I was 19, I was walking down a grocery aisle and a little kid stopped and said, "Mom, look, she's colored." That was a pivotal moment in my life to understand that I was different. I didn't just belong to the American community as a whole. I've grown up being always asked, "Where are you from? You don't have an accent, your name is so unique, you speak English really well." And I've often ignored the implication in those comments that you don't belong until this moment took place. Growing up, I was truly sheltered from recognizing discrimination against Asian Americans, Black Americans, Latino and Hispanic Americans as well. But this moment it happened when I was 19. It's not to say that things didn't happen leading up to that, but this is my vivid memory of that one moment of just knowing that I'm a person of color. And I stood frozen when that happened. The mom quickly came, took her son away, and avoided eye contact. I didn't have a reaction. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to react. And it's taken over a decade for me to recognize that that wasn't about me. That was perhaps an experience of the mom and the toddler not having been exposed to a community that was very diverse. And that it was perhaps a teaching moment for them, but it was also a teaching moment for me. It really pushed me to work harder at creating my own personal community that is diverse. Because diversity helps us also grow as individuals to be more open-minded and more accepting of differences in our lives, in our professional lives, in our personal lives. So it was a positive experience when I think back to it, maybe not in the moment of that experience. I hope these moments that you've experienced in your American stories have made you more resilient and more accepting of others in your lives. I just want to end by saying that I'm really excited to be here to celebrate AAPI month. We're different. We were always categorized as one group under AAPI, but we have our own unique stories. We have our own unique culture, religious practices, food, traditions. And I want to acknowledge that, yes, we have our differences, but we still make up a good, big community of America. And I want to celebrate that. I want to take events like this to acknowledge that we should be celebrating our unique identities and helping the bigger American community understand how much we contribute to America through our arts, through our holidays. I know Holy event was happening in Lexington yesterday. Events like that, and it got postponed, Mona. Rain happened. But just Lexington is fantastic in that we do celebrate all these moments throughout the year, and that we are open to inviting everyone and helping them learn more about who we are. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited to hear all our panelists and their American stories. I know I'm going to walk away learning something from all of you and helping me grow as a person. And I want to acknowledge my role in town. My position was created through advocacy from our Lexington residents to help our community and our organization, our local government, better work with our community, and acknowledging that we're here to service our Lexington residents, and to do that mindfully and embracing the differences that we have in our residents. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, CaLex, for inviting me and letting me open up this event.
Thank you so much, Ms. Shah, for sharing. Our first panelist of the afternoon is Pala Chia, a pre-K-12 educator from Cambodia and coordinator of the Lexington Learners Education Program in Lexington Public Schools.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for being here today, and thank you for all the organizers who's put this amazing event together, and all the participants who are here. I just wanted to share with you my personal story of survival, and also being able to come and work for a beautiful town such as Lexington. So my family and I can begin the story. My family and I came here as refugee when I was 9 years old. So when I came here, I did not speak a word of English. So I'm very proud today that I'm working for Lexington Public Schools as an administrator. But our family journey in survival, took a long time, our journey to arrive in the US. We came here in 1981, and prior to that, we lived through war and violence in Cambodia. Through the Khmer Rouge era, our family, the war lasted about 4 years. So a majority of my youth was spent trying to survive the war and the genocide that took place in Cambodia during that time period. And when it was over, our family decided to escape Cambodia in 1979 after the birth of my sister. So our family and I walked all the way to Thailand. It took us about 3 months to get there by foot. We had no idea where we were going and what would wait for us at the end of the journey. But we had to find a way to survive as a family and start a new life for ourselves. So our family trekked through the jungles between Cambodia and Thailand. And once we survived, we arrived in the camps, in the refugee camps in Thailand, where we saw many survivors of the genocide as well. And we stayed in the refugee camp for about 1.5 years. We were trying to look for our missing relatives, for any relatives who managed to survive and escape the genocide during that time. And so our family found a relative who lived out in Portland, Oregon. And when he heard that we were alive in the refugee camp, he sponsored us. So when we first arrived, we arrived in Portland, Oregon. So while in Portland, Oregon, my parents enrolled me in school for the very first time as a 4th grader. So I was a student with no education, no formal education at all, didn't have the opportunity to attend school. And I started 4th grade for the very first time, very scared, nervous, and had no idea how to function in a new school system. So I basically had to learn everything, from the alphabet, and then learn how to manage being in a new country, learning how to navigate the school system, and then try to make sense of my new world. And I had a very challenging time because I had no word of English to communicate with my peers or word of English to communicate with my teachers. So I sat in the back of the classroom for many years trying to make sense of what's happening in the classroom. And that, learning English, took me a long time to master. And I'm still learning English at this point. I've been here for more than 40 years now, but I feel like I'm still learning English. I'm still a long life learner. And, but our family, after surviving the genocide, our passion in life is to live and to be able to help each other survive and be able to help each other find success in the new world, not only just within our own family, but also our neighbors and our friends as well who managed to escape. So our family has been very involved in the Cambodian community, in the diaspora in Portland, Oregon, as well as here in Massachusetts. We have the 3rd largest Cambodian refugee in the United States in Lowell, Massachusetts. Number 1 being Long Beach, California. And Lowell, the 2nd, and Lynn, the 3rd. So when our family, while living in Portland, Oregon, we heard that there's a large community here in Massachusetts, so we decided to come to Lowell to live. And that's where I continue my education in Lowell, and also I attended the university there. And my parents, of course, we lost everything in our early life, that when we came to the US and try to resettle, we try to do our best to do what we can to promote ourselves through education, because we feel that so many people did not survive, did not have a chance to make it, right? So when we arrived, we put our heart and soul. My parents supported me through education, and I was able to find success in school. And I was able to complete high school and then went on to college. And then in 2003, I was able to receive my doctorate in leadership in schooling. And after I received my doctorate, my parents decided to, as a gift for all my hard work, bought me a round-trip ticket to Cambodia. And for the first time, I returned to my native country in 2003. I was very, very nervous because I didn't know what to expect. The memory that I brought with me to the United States, I wasn't sure whether that was my dream, my nightmare, my imagination, or something that happened for real. So it was an opportunity to go back home and affirm my memories, even the bad ones. So I went back, and I met many family members that I've never met before, and made new friends, and was able to reconnect with my past. I went back to my family's hometown, and our life, our homes were lost to us. We could never reclaim. And then, trying to see what I could do in Cambodia. So I met the director of an organization of the documentary Center of Cambodia. Their work is around developing curriculum to teach students, young students, about the genocide, about Khmer Rouge history. And I was able to work with them to develop a curriculum that could be taught in schools across Cambodia. And I was able to go back and forth on many occasions to help train the educators in Cambodia so that they would be able to teach about Cambodian genocide to the students. Because the students, prior to that, they've never had an opportunity to learn about the history. Many of them did not know what happened between 1975 and 1979. So it was an amazing project that Cambodia started, because it is so important for us to teach our students, our youngsters, about the history of the past, so that something so horrific would not be repeated again in the country. So we go back and forth. I've gone back to Cambodia about 9 to 10 times now to help train the educators in Cambodia so that the history would not be forgotten. More than 2 million people perished during that time period. Many of my relatives were killed and executed, including my older sister, who died of starvation during that time period. So, when we survived and we came to the United States, we lived for the people who did not make it. We lived for our relatives who were executed and died of starvation. So I feel like my life now is not my life alone, but I also have to live on for my family members as well. So I really appreciate, you inviting me to share my story, and I'm so sorry to share with you such sadness in my life on a Sunday afternoon with all of you. But I thank you for listening to me, and that is my American story. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chia, for sharing. Your story is so inspiring, and it's incredible how much adversity you had to overcome when your family first moved here. And as a high school student at LHS, it's just so inspiring to hear about your experiences in school and what you're doing now for the school system. So, and also it was great to hear that you were given the opportunity to reconnect with your roots and your past. So next up, let's welcome Su Miao Chen, who is the 2022 MRA Restaurateur of the Year and a former pharmaceutical researcher. Her passion for food led her to open Su Miao Hunan Kitchen in Cambridge, Massachusetts, as well as other restaurants in the area.
Well, I'm shorter too. All right. So thank you, Paula, for sharing the story. That may make me very touched. And my story is more conventional. So I'm more talking about myself, my restaurant, and how I pursuing a dream in this country as a new immigrant. So before I talk, I would like to share with you a couple of slides. Oops. That's showing you where is the restaurant and what the restaurant looks like. So Su Miao Hunan Kitchen is located at Kendall Square, and this is what it looks like. And the interior is very modern, playful, bright, sleek, colorful. All the color I brought from my hometown. So this is from the custom of a home dress, the woman dress from my hometown. And then this is the menu. This is the Hunan cuisine. We are the first one to introduce this authentic regional cuisine to Boston. And of course, we have beverage dessert program. And also, you know, we had a live band every Thursday, Wednesday night, and also we had all the multicultural event happening in our restaurant. And then now I would like to move to my storytelling. My name is Su Miao Chen. I own and operate a restaurant named after myself, Su Miao Hunan Kitchen, in Kendall Square, Cambridge. In July 2023, this year, we will be celebrating the 6th anniversary of my restaurant. I want to take this opportunity to express my deepest gratitude to my guests, employees, and our community, including you, for your unwavering support throughout our journey. People often ask me why you wanted to open a restaurant while you already have a career and a job in pharmaceuticals. Here is my story. When I arrived in America in 1992 for medical research, study, and work, I quickly realized how much I missed the flavor of my home province, Hunan, over the course of 28 years. While I worked in pharmaceuticals in Cambridge, I held on to a dream of opening a Hulanese restaurant in Boston. My second hometown, I envisioned a place that would challenge the conventional notion of a Chinese restaurant, offering top-notch, friendly service, an elegant atmosphere, and delicious food that shaped my upbringing in Hunan, food that I always eat, enjoy every day. Since our opening in the summer of 2017, we have delighted both Bostonians and visitors with unique experience and flavors. From hosting fashion shows to staging numerous live music performances, we have aimed to elevating the culinary and the musical texture that this city we love to live. Moreover, despite the challenge posed by COVID-19, we persevered and thrived. During those trying times, we united to raise $18,000 for frontline healthcare work in Wuhan, China, when they were most affected by the virus. And we never ceased our effort during the pandemic, smoothly transitioning to take-out-only service during the initial phase of the pandemic, and safely reopen our doors to public. Furthermore, we have consistently sponsored our community, a multicultural event and support our community, such as diabetes research, funding, and the AAPI book drive for the Cambridge and Somerville Library. In 2022, our restaurant was honored as the best Chinese restaurant of Boston by Boston Magazine, and I was humbled to receive the Restaurateur of the Year award for Massachusetts Restaurant Association. Thank you. Which is in their 16 years history, among the 16,000 members, we are the only restaurant awarded by these two great rewards. Reflecting upon these milestones fills me with tremendous pride. Above all, I hope that we have been instrumental in training the next generation of Chinese restaurateurs, including highly skilled chefs, bartenders, managers, and waitstaff. Their dedication to learn about Chinese culture and provide an exceptional dining experience to every customer who walks through our door is truly commendable. Sumiao Hulen Kitchen, my lifelong dream, representing one of my American dreams and stories. Yes, I've brought so many dreams to this country, but this is one of them. As a new immigrant, holding on our dream and turning them into reality is a way to embrace and preserve our culture, adapt to the new environment, build confidence, contribute our value, and give back to the society. Our story of pursuing dream, preserving culture, and making a possible impact as immigrants is genuinely inspiring. It serves as testament to what can we achieve through hard work, determination, and unwavering belief in one's vision and dream. This land is our land, and this land is my land. This land was made for you and me. In celebration AAPI Month 2023, I'm delighted and honored to share my American story here. I also want to thank my family. Let's go to last slide. My father, who has been listening my American story in heaven with smiles. He was the one who gave me $15,000 back in 1992 and sent me, his only child, to America to pursue my dream. My 88-year-old mother, who overcame the separation pain for years, now is waiting for my return and our reunion after 3 years of pandemic. My parents-in-law, who came to America to support us and helped me raise my 2 kids for many years, and died during COVID. My 2 lovely sons, who I have learned so much from them. during my parenting. Lastly, my husband, Xiao, who is always the most strong part of my life in all perspectives. In fact, my American story is a family story in American. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chen, for sharing. Your story of turning your dream of opening a restaurant into reality was truly inspiring to me. Now we have Sylvia S. Han, an experienced wealth management advisor who also holds committee positions at Lexington Education, Korean American Organization of Lexington, and CEL.
Thank you so much, CaLex, for this kind invitation to speak today. I really value this effort to foster understanding and inclusion. This is a great panel. My name is Sylvia Han. I am a second-generation Korean American and was born in upstate New York to parents who immigrated to the U.S. to start a new life after the Korean War. My father first visited the U.S. as a U.S. medical doctor in a Korean Army MASH unit during the war after learning that he could apply for an internship with the U.S. Army hospitals. So he took the entrance exam and was selected to specialize in internal medicine. He was motivated to learn English by his desire to communicate with U.S. Army hospital officers and used Japanese textbooks as he couldn't find any Korean textbooks at the time. He accompanied higher-ranking Korean Army officers to Letterman Army Hospital in San Francisco, a trip which really inspired a strong desire to live in the U.S. He then carefully laid plans to come to the U.S. and ultimately came to the U.S. to start an internship in New Jersey, getting free passage on a cargo ship from Korea to the U.S. He told us at the time that he weighed 110 pounds. My mother also came after the war, and following her father, who was a medical doctor, and he was sponsored by missionaries to come to the U.S. She had to interrupt her university studies in Korea to make the move. But still I remember her saying that America was a great country. All you have to do is work hard. Her own family had been accidentally split up, with mother and brother left behind in North Korea. Her father was later heard to say that, "I left the egg yolk," his son, referring to his son, in North Korea, and brought only the egg whites, referring to his daughters. My parents met at Syracuse University as graduate students, with my father getting a PhD and my mother getting a master's. When I was still a baby, my father was at risk of deportation from the US because his visa status was precarious. Renewal had been denied, and this was before the ban on quotas. There used to be a quota system in the US in national immigration law. My parents considered living in the UK and, of course, returning to Korea. A New York congressman entered a bill to Congress to lawfully admit him, and this was based on a need for his skill set. So it often makes me wonder how things would have turned out differently for me in a different country. All this to say is that I admire and give my parents tremendous credit for coming to the US and establishing a life here. It seemed to have taken a lot of determination to succeed. I simply having been born in the US by comparison seems kind of like starting at third base. When me, my sister and brother were kids, we lived in the suburbs of Albany, and my parents were working at their respective jobs as a cardiologist and research scientist. What was different than, and I've been in Lexington for 21 years, and my kids went through the school system here. And what was different than what my own kids experienced in Lexington was that, there was a tremendous lack of diversity in our schools that we attended. Out of my own high school class of 500, there were 3 Asians and 1 other person of color. So when I was applying for college and it came time for alumni interviews, he asked me what was special about me. And without hesitation, I said, well, I'm Asian, which was maybe a little, given the number of Asians in the world, might have seemed like a delusional and unimaginative answer. But to my 17-year-old mind, I being the only Asian around had been an ever-present feature of my life. I was aware that our household, where my parents were speaking Korean, we were eating Korean food, and mostly seemed to be discussing how much we were practicing our instruments and doing homework, was somehow different from other households, and worried that my parents might feel isolated, or that we were outside of a general flow of, I'll just call it American information, needed to be successful in life. At the time, I stayed busy with school, going to the pool, endless orchestra rehearsals, chatting with friends, and being at school, and all seemed to turn out okay, despite always having this slightly uneasy feeling about being different from everybody else. My parents would mention the war from time to time, the Korean War, and even suggest to us that we become medical doctors because it's always a useful profession, especially if there's a war. I took this as, that seems like good advice, even though, in retrospect, a war was probably not going to break out anytime soon in upstate New York. This theme of being the only person of color or the only woman in the room extended to my earlier professional life, which has consisted of working in the corporate world. I'm going to skip a few steps here, but ultimately, I entered the institutional asset management industry as an analyst and eventually portfolio manager, which is a very homogeneous setting and very few Asians. My thinking at the time was always, it's very important for me to assimilate, dress, talk like my colleagues, and adopt their manner. So adopt the assertive but temperate manner that my bosses seem to have. The assertive part was very difficult. In my own family, we weren't encouraged to express ourselves or speak up, and even told we might bother people if we talked too much. This was not an act of suppression by my parents, but I think a belief that having a quieter manner or being more of a listener would promote harmony. I would later be referred to as shy by Americans, which tended to bother me since I didn't really feel like I was shy. But after getting a lot of real-time feedback through the years from American friends and other people around me, including someone at work who gave me the well-meant advice to say table pounding bye whenever I talked about a stock, I realized I had to be seen. To be seen, I really had to be heard, and had to move toward a habit, to me, of seeming to say literally everything on my mind, or seem like I was cutting into conversations. And this will always take extra effort, I think, for me. The old programming is hard to shake and probably just a part of me, but I think I've achieved a middle ground. Half the battle, I think, is realizing that as an Asian, it's important to voice your perspective, and people really need to understand where you're coming from to feel comfortable. Right now that I'm in wealth management as a financial advisor, being a good listener turns out to be a virtue. I've noticed more Asians in finance in general, some of whom are trying to address the next battle, which may be to see more Asians in leading positions, such as the C-suite, which I kind of take as a sign of progress. There's a great need, in my view, for Asians to share their stories like we're doing today, articulate the virtues that Asians have, and to be seen by non-Asians for the well-intentioned people and fellow Americans that we are. And it really will help dispel biases and stereotypes. Closer to home here in Lexington, I'm really gratified to have become involved on the board of the Korean American Association of Lexington, co-founded by Susie Lee Snell, who's in the audience, and Caroline Yang, thanks to Caroline Yang, who brought me onto the board. Both Susie and Caroline are former American Story panelists. And for me, it's really been great to see a community of Korean parents in Lexington who can support each other and really, hopefully, dispel that feeling of isolation that comes from having that perpetual foreigner feeling. I've noticed that some of the Korean kids many of them have learned Korean, something that was missing in my upbringing, and I believe they'll really benefit greatly from their multilingualism. I've seen a wonderful receptivity as well from other Lexington nonprofit organizations to learning more about Korean culture and involving our CaLex community. And I don't think it's because they want to have Korean fried chicken and just watch K-dramas. So I think just the town, the receptivity of the town is great. And I want to thank CaLex for this wonderful panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Han, for sharing your story and for emphasizing the importance of speaking up and not conforming to the stereotypes imposed upon many Asian people. And it has been so difficult to be the only Asian person in your class of 500 people. And it's so great that you didn't just conform to those expectations. So next up, it is my pleasure to welcome Samita Mandalia, a longtime Lexington resident, town meeting member, and award-winning realtor who is dedicated to making positive changes in our community.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, CaLex, for having us here and organizing this wonderful celebration of the AAPI month. And I am excited to share my American story, my journey, and finally finding my true home in this wonderful town of Lexington. And it's been heartwarming to hear all the other panelists' story. So I'm going to begin now. My name is Samita Mandalia, and my story begins when I was 25 years old. When I came to Boston from Mumbai, India, for my husband's MBA, I arrived on a dependent visa, which meant I couldn't work at that time. And as I stepped foot on American soil for the first time, I felt a wave of emotions wash over me. The initial shock came in the form of a deep sense of loneliness, a stark contrast to the bustling life I had known and grown up with back in India. I missed the constant company of my friends and the warmth of my family always being around. It felt as though I had been uprooted from everything familiar and thrown into something entirely overwhelming and new. When Ashish, my husband, began his studies, I fortunately was able to make some friends at his school who helped me navigate this new chapter in my life. After about 8 months of being in the States, I went back to India for a visit. Those moments spent with my family and friends fueled my determination to continue my journey. Growing up in a simple house with 2 older siblings, I never really had to travel very far. Life revolved around the vicinity of our home. My school and college were just a stone's throw away, and all of my closest friends lived barely a few blocks away from my house. So it took me a few years to get used to this new land. One of the most daunting challenges I faced was unlearning and relearning the rules of the road. I remember the countless hours spent practicing behind the wheel, adjusting to being on the right side of the road. Getting my driver's license ended up being a significant milestone for me. In 2003, my daughter Ishika was born, and my life changed once again. As she grew older, I began working in a Chinese publishing firm. My experiences in the professional realm shaped me in ways I never anticipated. I discovered a reservoir of untapped confidence within myself, and through my work, I formed deep connections with colleagues who became more than just co-workers. They became cherished friends who uplifted and inspired me. I began to carve my own path, finding my own sense of identity that extended beyond my husband's network and his circle of friends. I remember calling my parents to come visit us from India in 2006, the opportunity to share our journey with them and to witness their delight and immerse them in the experiences that had shaped us. After the trip concluded, it was my father's words that struck a chord deep within my heart. With a joyous note, he exclaimed, "I had the time of my life." To have brought such joy and fulfillment to my parents, to have given them a taste of the life we had built in this new land, filled me with an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. It was a validation of the sacrifices we had made, the hurdles we had overcome, and the resilience that defined our journey. As my daughter started daycare, I was getting more accustomed to the American life by shunting between work and home. 5 years later, my son Arav was born, and when he turned 2, we migrated once again, this time to London, UK. The first year in London tested the depths of our perseverance. It was a period marked by uncertainty as we navigated the unfamiliar streets and grappled with new cultural nuances. But in the second year, we had the opportunity to travel a lot, which opened our eyes to new experiences. And after 2 years in England, we came back to Lexington. But adjusting back to our former normal proved to be another difficult challenge, especially for my daughter, who was 10 at that time. Her old friends at Bowman Elementary had moved on, and fitting into school was hard for her. I made an effort to fit in by getting more involved. I became a room parent and tried to contribute to her educational journey. And this kicked off my journey as a volunteer as well. While we were looking to buy a house in 2013, I realized the need for a realtor who would understand our cultural needs, who would resonate to what we were looking for in a house. It was around this time when I began a new profession in real estate. The competitive nature of the industry tested my resilience and pushed me to expand my knowledge and skills. Each day presented a new set of hurdles that required perseverance and an unwavering commitment to providing the best service for my clients. I became the first Indian American Lexingtonian female realtor. It was an opportunity to break barriers, challenge stereotypes, and pave the way for others who aspire to follow their dreams in this dynamic field. In 2014, we bought our first house, and with this, we finally started to feel a little bit more stabilized. Our children continued their education in the Lexington school system. Finally, we obtained our green cards, which was another significant milestone in our journey. I also became more involved in the Lexington community, both in schools and the Indian American community. I learned of a Navratri event in a neighboring town, but the late evening start time meant that children would miss out on the joyous celebration. I grew up enjoying this cultural event in Mumbai, so determined to create an inclusive experience that would resonate with young and old alike, I embarked on a mission to establish our very own Navratri event right here in Lexington. Countless hours were spent meticulously planning, coordinating, and spreading the word throughout the community. And year after year, Navratri in Lexington has grown, surpassing my wildest dreams. It has become a cherished tradition, eagerly anticipated by the Indian diaspora and the wider community. And every year, we get an attendance of over 500 people. After 4.5 years, we reached a significant milestone in our journey. We finally became citizens of the United States. As an American, I felt an even deeper connection to this land that had embraced us and offered us countless opportunities for growth and success. Inspired by this newfound sense of belonging, I sought to take an active role in town meetings where I ran for office and ended up being elected. Over the years, my journey has brought me closer to embracing my identity as an American, as the values, customs, and nuances of this land have woven their way into the very fabric of my being. While my love for India remains steadfast and unyielding, there are moments when I return to the land of my roots and feel a sense of displacement, like a puzzle piece that no longer quite fits. The contrast between the two worlds can be stark, and at times I find myself navigating a delicate dance between honoring my past and embracing the present. In the tapestry of my American story, the threads of my life have woven together to create a narrative of growth, transformation, and personal fulfillment. Each chapter has shaped me into the person I am today, from the challenges of navigating cultural differences to finding my place in a new society. I've traveled to over 20 countries now, and the diversity of my experiences and the multitude of roles I have assumed, wife, mother, professional, volunteer, have all contributed to the intricate fabric of my life. They have shaped my identity, broadened my perspective, and fueled my desire to make a positive impact within my community and beyond. Together, let us celebrate the mosaic of America, where our diversity unites us and our commonality inspires us to build a brighter tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nandelia, for your wonderful story. Now I'd like to have Vincent Yi, an author who wrote the young adult fantasy series Claire Wu and the Portal Book, to share his story.
Thank you so much. I know I'm the sixth person to say thank you today, but you know what? On behalf of all the panelists, we are very thankful to have CaLex to have us today. And while I have the amazing tech person here get the presentation up, let's give him a round of applause as well, okay? Because he's been doing amazing work. And who's all these phones? Okay. Oop. Go back to the beginning. There we go. Oh, that's the third slide. Go back to the beginning. Oh, no. There we go. Great. Okay. So, my name is Vincent Yi, and I am the author and creator of Claire Wu and the World of Azen. Quick story about me, about my American story. I was born in Boston. I'm an ABC, an American-born Chinese. And I born in Boston, grew up in Brookline, now live in Cambridge, went to school in Boston, and I also worked for banking, retail, and insurance. That is my American story, because what I want to do with the rest of my time here is to tell you about the American story that I wrote. So again, Claire Wu and the World of Azen. It's a 5-book young adult Asian American fantasy series which I wrote and published during the pandemic. And I have a nice little video here.
For all the little boys and girls who look like me watching tonight, this is a beacon of hope and possibilities This is proof that dreams dream big and dreams do come true.
And if you have older children, middle school or high school, I recommend a book by Vincent Yi. That's another one of our authors. Say hi, Vincent.
What's up, Vincent?
What's up, Vincent? I really like that series because it shows Asian Americans that they can be superheroes. And I think everyone should have the opportunity to see themselves as superheroes in stories that they read and TVs that they watch.
Yeah, especially kids growing up. That's like so important.
So very quick, when I went through the Brookline school system, these were the books that I read. Narnia, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Lord of the Rings, and I grew up with Harry Potter. All awesome books, but none of them had Asian American characters. So I decided to write one. And the catalyst was because of Stop Asian Hate. During the pandemic, it was a very scary time for many of us. But for the Asian American community, it was a harrowing time for us. I have friends who were victims of violence, they were harassed. And during this time, I've actually had friends that actually literally sheltered in place because they were scared of the violence that they could encounter in public. But the other thing also is, so many Asian Americans, especially young ones, heard so many horrible things in the media about us. So that's why I wanted to write. I wanted to write a story that could be uplifting to the Asian American community so that they could see themselves as heroes and so that our kids can see themselves as heroes as well. There was a survey that was done just last month. 44% of Americans cannot name a famous living Asian American. And that is why we have to take control of our narrative, tell our stories, write our stories. So that's why I wrote for better Asian representation. These are some things that have come about after I wrote my book. I was on a podcast. I got myself into libraries, including Lexington. Got into bookstores, won an award, and I got myself onto the Kelly Clarkson show for her AAPI kickoff because it is so important for Asian Americans to see themselves as superheroes from the onset, when they are young. And hopefully, you will find these 4 characters, these amazing characters, Clara Wu, Yuka Sato, Sung Kim, and Daniel Wynn, which is the first, I believe, multi-Asian cast story in a fantasy medium. Now, in case you're wondering, I do have ideas if I'm able to write another volume of 5 books. I have an Indian character, a Cambodian character, and a Filipino character that are in my head. They're in my head. They want to come out. I just have to make this first volume successful. So I want to say thank you to CaLex and to all the wonderful panelists and the MCs and the moderators, and our tech person, of course. And that's a little bit about me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for presenting Mr. Yi. As a student, it's always great to read books where there are characters that I can relate to. Those books are my favorite books. So I'm going to the library right after this, and I'm reading all of those books. And I hope everyone here does too. So we're actually going to add one more speaker to our event. Mr. Larry Ho, would you like to speak?
This is totally unrehearsed, unprepared. But listening to all this inspiring story by the other speakers, I'd like to add my own, how I lived my American dream in the last 70 years, more than 70 years, all in Greater Boston area. And my name is Larry Ho. Actually, I'm far better known in Lexington as the husband of Sophia Ho standing there. And I'm very proud of that fact. I'm known as the husband because last summer, if you are still here, you may see one of the 42 banners in the Lexington Center, one of which featured her as one of the 42 women who have contributed to Lexington community life in the last 300 years. So I'm very proud of this fact. But I would like to tell my American story, or family's American story, in similar fashion, inspired by previous speakers. I came here all alone at age 16. No family, no friends. And, but I survived and went on. First lucky thing happened to be 1953. The Congress passed something called Refugee Relief Act for people in East European countries who are behind the Iron Curtain, and you are allowed to get green card this way. I was a student here, but I said, I have no families in Communist China, which was taken over by Chinese Communist Party, and I should qualify. And Congress, in its wisdom, did not say the Relief Act only applies to East European countries. So I got my green card this way, my first lucky break, even though I was a student, and only 7 years after the repeal of the Chinese Exclusion Act, which many of you will still know. Then next comes my lucky break. I came back to graduate school, and I'm here at Harvard, and I was drafted. I had my physical total report to Fort Dix, but my draft board in all its wisdom said, oh, you study aerospace engineering in graduate school, and the Sputnik just went up. We're in a race. The Army doesn't need you. Go back to finish your study and contribute. So I was literally plucked out of the Army for 4 years. We're able to continue my graduate study and then finished. So that's a second lucky break, of not my own doing. But then, after finishing school, I had one job from which I retired some 20 years ago. And I lived a very un-American life. Not in the usual sense of un-American, be disloyal and patriotic, but in the sense of not typical. I only had, as I said, one job from which I retired. And I married one woman, still standing there, 64 years ago, to whom I'm still married. All my children went to the same kindergarten, elementary, middle school, high school, and university through the Lexington career because of the good school they provided. I had one insurance agent who passed on that I worked with son, and his son retired 2 years ago. I'm now working with the third generation. I was the first client, my lawyer, and he retired. Now I'm working with the junior partner. And also my CPA. I started with him in 1958 when I started my first job. And now he's retired. I work with the junior partner. So in that sense, un-American is very untypical as an American life. I lived here all my life. I bought one house in which I lived in Lexington until I retired. And here 2 years ago, I moved to a retirement community, still in Lexington. So in that sense, I lived a very un-American life. And, but our family lived the American dream. You know, since President Carter normalized the relationship between China and the US, I've returned to China many times, and people always say, oh, you should come back, pay back your debt to your mother country. My answer to them is that everything I have is given to me by the United States because the freedom of opportunity provided. I paid back China many, many times in terms of some 30 PhD students, Chinese students I've educated and funded it here. The fact is, voted with their feet. Most of them try to remain, stay here. It's not my doing. It's their choice. I paid back China in many, many ways. But my gratitude really is towards America for the freedom opportunity it provided. And I literally live the American dream in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ho, for sharing. It was a truly wonderful story and very inspiring to me, and I'm sure all of us as well. I would now like to open up the panel Q&A. And the first question I would like to ask is, the term AAPI is an umbrella term referring to a diverse array of peoples, each embodying a unique Asian American experience. How is our community united despite our differences in identity and experience? And I would first like to invite Ms. Chia to answer. Okay. The term AAPI is an umbrella term referring to a diverse array of peoples, each embodying a unique Asian American experience. How is our community united despite our differences in identity and experience?
Thank you for that question. It's a very important one. And I think, being Asian, arriving in the early 1980s, a lot of people didn't know that I come from Cambodia. So I'm often indicated or called as Chinese, because at the time, everyone who's from Asia are Chinese. So I spent a great deal of my youth being referred to as a Chinese person who's related to Bruce Lee, and that I know how to, I know Kung Fu. So for a long time, I was a Chinese girl. And I accepted that because I didn't question anyone. And I thought, it's good to be Chinese. It's good to know Kung Fu so that I do not get bullied in school. But after I grew older, when I attended college, I started to ask myself, who am I really? Because throughout the school system, I did not have the opportunity to learn about Asian culture, Asian history. It's only when I started college for the very first time that I get to enroll and learn about Asia, and the course was called Vietnam War. So it was amazing that I went through the school system without knowing the history, the culture behind Asia. And I waited until I attended school for the very first time in college to learn about Asia through Vietnam War. And I was proud to learn about the history, and I was proud to try to figure out who my identity was and be able to accept and say, hey, I'm Cambodian. I'm not Chinese. I am Cambodian. And that's when I started to try to learn more about the Cambodian culture so that I have a better understanding and be able to accept and be able to fit in and adjust, not only in the American way, but also the Cambodian way. Because when I grew up, I had many conflicts with my older generation, with my parents, because they wanted me to be Cambodian, but I didn't know what that was, right? I wanted to be able to fit in. I want to be Americanized. I want to be able to be just like my classmate who are just American. So thank you for that question. I hope I responded.
Oh, same question? Yeah. So I never have this question. So I will never have this, people ask me, we are assuming I'm Chinese. People can tell my accents from my accents. Actually, there's a funny story. As a Hulanese in China, even speak Mandarin, people can tell this is a Hulanese because the Hulanese is so tough to change their accents. So I have a story to share. I have my one of the assistant professor who was visiting scholar, visiting in study and research in United States. He was shopping in a grocery store and paying the money to the cashier. And some Chinese traveler long distance approach him asking, "Are you Hulanese?" He said, "God, I'm speaking English. Why he can tell me it's a Hulanese?" So this is something, just fun story to share. But you know, define your identity always is a question, and it takes thought as an immigrant. So who I am. Like before I came to this panelist discussion, I have to thinking, should I speak some Chinese or some English? Or I'm hoping there is an AI program when I speak Chinese can automatically speak bilingual English. So I have two words I can speak out. So, but you know, in deep our mind and in our blood, who I am. That's a question we always asking. My mom asked me the same question too. So he's after spent 30 years in the United States, are you considering you're Chinese or American? I know she was hoping my answer is Chinese. But you know, I tell her, Mom, I'm living in a Earth village. Now everything is globalized. You know, but anything I can answer you, I'm forever your daughter. Thank you.
Well, I think similar to Fala, there is, you know, my parents came from Korea, and at that time, there was a strong desire on their part to have their children assimilate. And their view that it was at that time that they wouldn't be returning to Korea. So they wanted us to learn English to the point where they didn't emphasize Korean just because they wanted to make sure we could learn, you know, speak English. And then there was this feeling of being at that, because there's so few Asians, that this sort of generic Asianness, where you could be easily confused with a Chinese person, and you almost didn't care. It's fine. You know, you were like, that's fine. My last name is Han. It could go either way. But I think what was Asian was definitely the values that were imparted, and the focus on you know, studying hard and achievement, and really the family, just how important it is to represent your family by doing well. And so those are maybe universally Asian. You know, I still, so I'm clearly American because I was born here, and culturally that's the context that I grew up in. But you know, I'm also forever Korean because of, you know, because of my family and the tremendous admiration that I have for them and their heritage.
So yeah, just tagging along with what everyone else is saying, that yeah, we do question what we are, Asian or rather Indian American. So in next year, I think I will be here equal amount of years, like 25 years I was in India, and then slowly it's getting to be more. And like I spoke in my speech, it's like striking a balance between both. I was never raised by my parents pushing the Indian culture, or you got to live your life in this way, or in meeting their expectations. And that's what I'm trying to do with my children. I think they also sometimes have that question, if we push too much of our American Indian culture, and then it just kind of throws them off as well. So I think I am where I am. I would be saying it's striking the right balance between not losing your cultural values, but also adapting well to the American lifestyle living. And I'm so fortunate to have found and made meaningful relationships in America. But I have to say something, that even today, when it's been almost now 25 years in this country, we still, as a group of friends, if we do go out, we're often asked, where are you from? And I know right away what they're trying to ask. So I very coyly reply, oh, we are from Lexington, or we are from Boston. Yeah, but where are you from? And it's just so, now I just laugh it off. This is not gonna stop. It's gonna be there. It's part of a package deal, we can say. But I'm proud to be Indian American, and I thank Lexington and our wonderful community here. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm going to give a different perspective, because as a storyteller, my goal in my stories was to show that these 4 teenagers, they do go through their identity crisis and conflict. But because of the world that they're in and the new powers that they get, they become very proud of who they are. A Chinese American, Korean American, Vietnamese American, and a Japanese American. And the whole thing is all about their culture becomes their superpower, because in order to become the superpowers that they are in my story, they have to embrace their culture. I won't tell you how, you will have to read the book. But that's the great thing is, a lot of my friends are sending their kids to Asian schools and what have you, and they hate it, okay? But I want to transform that. I want to transform our language. So it's no longer a burden, but a superpower. And I want our friends, readers, to also see us as superheroes in the pop cultural American mindset as well. So, because when you ask any person, do you see an Asian American as a superhero, they may have to think about it. There's Ms. Marvel, there's Shang-Chi, and what have you. But it will take time for them to think about it. And we want it to be more immediate, because we have to become at the mindset in American culture. And that's where storytelling comes in. Thank you.
My fellow panelists have said a lot of what I'd want to say, but I would like to tag on to something about what Vincent said about storytelling. It's important that we realize that in having this dual identity, that is our superpower. I'm going to take that, because the truth is that it teaches us to be nuanced thinkers. It teaches us to have empathy. It teaches us to perspective taking. When you have immigrant parents, and I think similar to Sylvia, I'm born and brought up here I'm in my 50s, and so that was a time when I was like you, I was the only brown girl in school. I mean, people thought I was Puerto Rican. They'd never seen an Indian before. And so it's, because that's all they knew. I think they thought I was from Chico and the Man. So it was a very different time that I grew up in, but I think that experience, I would like to think, has given me a lot of superpowers, and I'm glad that we have young talent that's taking that perspective and putting it on pages for the next generation to read. It's totally okay to go to language school. As soon as I'm done here, I'm going to Bengali school to teach Bengali music. It's totally okay to be your authentic selves. I'm not going to apologize for being Indian or Bengali or anything else. We should be proud of being Asian, and we sure should be proud of being American. We make America rich because we're Asian and because of our heritage.
I'm just going to echo what everyone else said, and especially Mona, because growing up, people would just start speaking to me in Spanish. But I grew up in Waltham, which was extremely rich in diversity, and I appreciated that. I'm 34, I'm young, but I used to experience identity crisis, right? I'm Indian at home. Outside of home, I have to be American, I have to act American in speaking English, and the nuances and little behaviors that we have. But, over the years and just doing the job that I do, I'm proud of who I am. Asian Americans, East Asian Americans, all of us are celebrated. We're highly sought out in our positions, in our fields, to represent our identities, right? Sometimes it's a quota, but I think more often than not, people truly do value our smartness, our culture, our unique ability to share who we are in all of our environments. So I'm just so excited to hear all of your stories and know that we've all experienced to some extent our identity crisis, our fitting in, molding into the culture that we're presented in. I'm in awe of all of you and just hearing your stories.
All right, I have one more question for all of the speakers, and then we'll open up to the audience for a few questions. So my question for everyone here is, what is one pivotal moment in your life that led you to a new understanding of what it means to be Asian American? So let's start with Ms. Roy, and then we will move down the line back this way. Yes, a pivotal moment that led you to a new understanding of what it means to be Asian American.
Wow. I should have prepped for this one. I don't know that there's been one pivotal moment. I think what is true is that I think I've always known I was different, only brown girl in school, and I had a slightly different experience than a lot of other Indian Americans in that my parents completely pounded the Indian Bengali thing at home. They were never worried that we only spoke Bengali at home. People were like, your kid is never gonna speak English. I'm a lawyer, I learned. So I think the truth is that maybe when I got to school is when I've always known I was Indian, I've always known I was Bengali. I think the truth is I felt different, if that's what the question, I think if the question is about being different, then I guess it's when I was in school and people kept asking me first if I was Puerto Rican, and then after they were done with that, and then when they found out I wasn't Puerto Rican, they said, they thought I was Native American, because that's the only Indian they knew. And I think what's really tough is that for Asian Americans, to answer this question is going to be tough for all of us, because the truth is there are a lot of micro moments in our lives when we're made to feel like permanent foreigners. I'm born in Michigan. I'm just as American as anybody. I'm on the Lex 250. I'm more American than anybody. No, I'm joking. In all seriousness, I think we often are reminded of that, and it's important that we support each other to remind ourselves, no matter what other people think, that we are 100% American, and we belong here, and we make America great.
Awesome. I just wanted to share that one time I was mistaken for a Spanish person as well. It was a very interesting situation, which I won't delve into, but I was mistaken for someone who was Spanish. I think being a storyteller, I've always wanted to write stories that matter to the Asian American community. This Clara Wu and the World of AZN is my latest writing experience. My first book actually came out in 2012, which I actually wrote in 2004. It's called The Purple Heart. It's a story about love and courage, about the Japanese American experience in World War II. Because I just felt that what they went through, 120,000 Japanese Americans were interned simply because they were Japanese, and 2/3 of them were American-born. But despite their wives, their families, their girlfriends were imprisoned, 4,500 young Japanese Americans volunteered in the 442, and they were recognized with 9,861 Purple Hearts, and there's still not a movie about this American story. A big one. Like, yes, I know there are a lot of smaller ones that go for broke and what have you, but need something more recent, something more mainstream. think Titanic, you know? So, you know, it's about being on the big screen. And when I tried to pitch this to publishers and editors, I got some really blunt feedback from most of the publishers who are white. And I'm just saying that because it's from their perspective. And they said, you know, Vincent, America does not want to hear this story. We don't want to hear about the Japanese American experience. And I knew I needed to write more, but obviously working a full-time job, it was kind of tough. I had to find the opportunity, but for Clara Wu, the pandemic gave me the opportunity, but that's why I knew I had to continue to be a story writer. So that's mine.
So it's very hard to bottle down like one incident. I think every time I'm talking to my kids, I'm Asian American. I'm not completely American just because of how I am. In my professional front, I feel that sometimes I'm made to feel that. If I'm in the mall just walking and people call out namaste, namaste, you know, okay, namaste. So like I said, it's not one incident, but now I feel it's okay to be, it's okay. So it's very hard to put down just one instant, but like I said, we're proud to be Indian Americans here, all of us.
I think a pivotal moment for me might have been when I visited Korea, and up till that point, I thought of myself as primarily Korean, just given that I was the only Korean around. And but when you go there, you're in the Korean culture, you realize you're in that setting. You're like, oh, I'm very American actually. So that was pivotal, just kind of in solidifying for me that this kind of I am Korean American. I'm both. So. So that was pivotal, and yeah, that's my story.
To me, I came to this country studying research and study in medical and pharmaceuticals. In that field, because you're working with a group with same education background and same, we talk about science, research topic. So that's why when last time a newspaper report interviewed me, asked, do you feel difference when you came to this country, and do you recognize it? So, you know, my answer is, you know, before I came, and people already tell me, you go to America, there's discrimination. But when I came to this country, I never feel insecure and unsafe. And also, of course, I feel the difference. I realize the difference. But, you know, it's lecture. It's lecture. So even if you live in, same thing in China, you live in a big city as somebody from countryside, in the big city, they need to take process to adapt to the city life. The same thing is lecture. So we should not thinking about that twice, triple times, and very hardly. Just take lecture process. So in the first phase, I did not realize when I, you know, like I said, when I working in pharmaceuticals, I research field. And until I start invest business and open my career to other field, and you know, open a restaurant, I take that process to further advance my adaptation into this country, becomes better qualified citizen of America. So because once I open my mind to outside of research and medical, and then I feel, wow, I have to deal with medium, lawyer, accountant, government officer, and also employee which come from different background. And I further learned it's so great to be a American / Chinese / Korea/Cambodia, because we are very open-minded. When you immigrate to different country, requires brave to change yourself. So this is already a strong foundation compared to Native American. Thank you.
So I always know that I was different. You know, looking in the mirror every day, there's nothing I can do to change my face or the color of my skin or the way my mannerism. But it took me a long time to accept who I was as a Cambodian person. And be able to say that I am not only Cambodian, but also American. So when I introduce myself here in the US, I always say, you know, they always ask me, like, who are you? I always say, I'm Cambodian. But when I go to Cambodia, when they ask me, who are you? I would say, I'm Cambodian American. Because here, I feel, you know, with all the media attention that Asians have been receiving, the rhetoric that we hear on television, it's not positive. I wish I can crawl under a rock somewhere and hide or change the way I look to be more accepted. But things that we hear and see on television, it's not positive. So sometimes I feel ashamed of who I am as a Cambodian person. But then other times, you know, there's a lot to be proud of. There's a lot to be proud of as a Cambodian person, as an Asian person. And I feel like diversity is important to our nation and for everyone to get along. Because, you know, everywhere I turn, I see differences, right? So I don't understand, sometimes I ask myself, why can't we accept everybody's differences and find ways to get along? So now that I'm older, I feel more comfortable in my own, you know, person, and being able to say, hey, you know, I'm proud of my culture. I'm proud of being Cambodian American. I'm proud of being Asian. When people say, hey, are you Chinese? Now I feel comfortable to correct and say, no, I'm not Chinese. I'm Cambodian. I'm of Cambodian descent. Before I just accept that I'm Chinese, I'm related to Bruce Lee, you know. So, but now I try to, you know, explain who I am now. So I'm not embarrassed and ashamed anymore.
I've also had a lot of pivotal moments, including the story in my opening remark. But more recently, it's when I first became pregnant with my daughter in 2021. My husband and I were talking about names. Both of our names were always butchered. We always had anxiety in classroom. When the teacher got to our name, we would just know that it was just gonna be mispronounced. It was embarrassing. It was just stressful. So we're talking about names, and we started asking our friends if they can pronounce the names that we had in mind. At some point, we just stopped doing that and decided we wanted to pick an Indian name because we are part of who we are. We are Indian, he's Indian, and we wanted a name that reflected our Indian identity. The becoming parent has really shifted our acknowledging our identity, because we want the next generation to appreciate, understand, celebrate that she is Indian. She's 1 year old, she doesn't know any of it right now, but as she grows up, we want her to be proud as we are of our identity. She is Indian American. And so that choosing the name was just that moment of realizing that we were trying to pick a name to make it easier for others to pronounce, and that wasn't fair to her or our identity as Indian American. So that's my most recent 2021 aha moment.
Thank you all to our panelists for sharing. Now we would like to take a question from the audience.
I'm a new resident of Lexington, joining the retirement community. You can see by my gray hair, I'm 84 years old. I came here when I was 10 years old from China. I spent my childhood in China. And I grew up in New York City. Never encountered any discrimination because there were so few of us. And in the process of the historical process in the 1970s with greater immigration, we did form a Chinese American community in upstate New York, but we did not interact between Asians, okay? And I retired to Seattle, and I was very pleasantly surprised about how Asians work together. Chinese, Japanese, Filipinos. My next door neighbor and good friends was a Japanese American whose parents was interned. So I'm very, I want to compliment CaLex for organizing this event to bring all of us together. On the other hand, we are a minority. But by the way, I just want to let you know now that I was born in Boston on Patriot Day. So I'm really an American, okay? But the reason I want to make this comment is because I think it's very good that we all get together and feel united. But unfortunately, the geopolitical situation is different, okay? And for whatever reason, a significant portion of the American population are under economic stress. And blaming Asian Americans is very easy. And geopolitically, there seemed to be an effort in Washington to divide China and India. Both of them have their own interest, but they don't want to have any war, but there's a stimulation of this. So this is my personal opinion. I don't know what's going to happen in the next 5, 10 years, but right now, you heard about the G7 meeting, but you know the BRICS economy is bigger than the G7s. So that in some sense, the European-dominated mentality is under threat. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on us, an Asian American community, and I will urge us to stick together because there is already an effort in trying to play one against another in the geopolitical sense, and it could be reflected back on our community. That's what I want to say. It won't happen in my lifetime, I'm 84, but it's going to be happening. I hope you younger generation will stick together. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to relate a music story in my life in the same vein as this inspiring speaker have said. You know, because of basically I was plucked out of the draft from the Army, and when I finished my study, I was given the chance to teach at Harvard at the lowest rank, because at that time, the aerospace, the moon race was very much in fashion, so I stayed on. And then, 4 years later, I was lucky to be offered tenure at Harvard to stay up for. And traditionally, only 1 in 4 junior faculty ever got promoted. So when that happens, the second in command at Harvard, which is sort of the internal president, the dean of arts and science, will call you in, make an appointment, and he will pat you on the shoulder, welcome you to the permanent faculty of Harvard University, and so forth. So in 1965, after 4 years, I was very lucky to be given tenure. And I had this appointment with the dean. So I really went in, and he took a look at me, he says, of course he was very busy, I excused him. He said, "Oh, what can I do for the Chinese Student Club?" And I got very embarrassed to try to tell him that, no, I was actually not a faculty. It's he who called me in to congratulate me for getting tenure. And of course, once I finally had to explain this, he got very embarrassed because at that time, most of the Asian Chinese faculty at Harvard, permanent faculty, are either teaching Oriental history or literature and so forth, not somebody in the engineering and science field that got tenure. So, but anyway, he got over this, pat me on the shoulder, and invited, said all the good words, and I stayed on for the next 46 years, and I think both sides did not regret the decision. So that's, looking back, of course, very amusing. It's not so much discrimination, but how time has changed in the last half a century.
Yes, ma'am? Yeah.
I'm going to make two short comments, not a question. First off, I love events like this. Thank you so much. I loved your stories, so inspiring. AAPI, the library last year for AAPI Week had an event on Zoom. Some of you might have seen it, Food, Culture, and Identity. I was so grateful to be one of the panelists on that. I spoke with some very famous people, Helen Chen, who's the daughter of the world famous Joyce Chen, right? So she was on the panel with me. There's another lady who's written a Korean Japanese cookbooks, Deborah Samuels. We were on a panel that was really great. That was last year. I'm going to also share a short anecdote. It relates to what you, Himali, said, right, about SMART. So many moons ago, I used to teach at BU and Northeastern. Now I teach cooking classes to kids and adults. At BU, I could remember 50 kids' names, literally, by heart, right? Now when I have 8 students, just 8, I need name tags. So I was talking to a Malaysian-American friend of mine, and I said, aging brain cells. And she says, why do you say Asian? Asians are smart. I said, no, not Asian, aging, like I'm getting old. The funny thing is, we've had this conversation 8 times. I keep saying, why do you say, I'm saying aging, not Asian, and she keeps saying, Asians are smart. We keep going back and forth, but that's what you said about being smart. So yes, as Mona said, America's richer for us. So proud to be an Asian American, and thank you again. I loved your stories, thank you.
I have a question of everybody. Now, I live in Lexington, America, 28 years, and I consider as me American. But when pandemic hit, there are so many Asian hate. So I don't know how we ourselves, we say, oh, I'm American. I am making the America rich and the diversity. But how about other side? How can build up bridge between two communities can understand better? I don't know how. Can you explain how can you do that? Because there's kind of a big gap for myself. I'm an American and I raised my 2 kids as an American. But there's American, but all people think they are not belong here. So I don't know how it can be two communities get together. Can you have an idea?
Please. I think to sum up what she just said, we have to control our narrative, right? So, 1990s, Joy Club came out, the first all-Asian American cast. Next one was Better Luck Tomorrow, 2002, an all-Asian American cast. It took 16 more years for Crazy Rich Asians to came out, and then 3 more years for Shang-Chi to came out. In 3 decades, America has only seen 4 Asian American movies, and that's not enough. We need 4 per year at least. And so we need to control our storytelling, read my books, make it into movies. I can write the next volume, include my Indian friends, my Filipino friends, and Cambodian friends, because we're amazing. We just have to write about it, control our narrative, get it onto the big screen.
Just like very similar what Korea did with K-drama and K-pop, they did it. We have to do it now here in America. So that's my answer.
I know you guys all have more questions, but we are running out of time, so we have to move on. If you have any questions, please stay after. So I'd like to welcome Mona Roy.
Hi, it's a privilege and pleasure to be here. I'm Mona Roy. I was former chair and outgoing vice chair of the Lexington Human Rights Committee, and it's been really privilege and pleasure to be part of this event since its inauguration 3 years ago. And I want to thank CaLex for really coming up with this idea of telling our American stories. I remember when they first had this idea during the pandemic, when others were taking hold of the narrative of Asian this, Asian that, and they said, wait a minute, we're Asian Americans. Where are our American stories? And it was a lot of work that first year on Zoom, getting everyone together, and they've now built it into they'll need a bigger room next year, over capacity events. So it's wonderful, and of course this event is made wonderful, but not only by the amazing panelists, but the audience that has attended and embraced these stories. I'm not going to tell my own personal story. You can always find me later, as I stand between you and delicious food. But I will say one thing, which is that I found myself in every one of these panelists today, and one of the things that I wanted to mention, I've mentioned a few of these things in passing, but Fala, you mentioned when you talked about your struggle and when you talked about your story about what it meant to leave, you really gave me a window into my own father, who had to leave his homeland as a refugee and escape during partition. And you said something really important. When there's genocide and you survive it, there's a passion to live. And you explained my father in a way that I never fully understood him until today, the passion to live. And thank you for that. You gave me the gift of remembering my father's passed away, but you reconnected me with his passion to live. So that was really a meaningful moment for me today. And I'm sure everyone in this audience found a lot of meaning. I represent the Lexington Human Rights Committee, and we are the civil rights arm of your town. We work closely with Himali on the town side. We're made up of folks from the town as well, this town, school, and community members. And we're here to listen to your concerns, and also we do programming. I'm sure most of you know the MLK Community Conversation, our Race, No Hate November, Race Amity Day, and we're a part of so much more. We are here to listen to you and to be sure that you can live a life in Lexington where you can live your authentic American story. There's no room for hate in this town. There's no room for ignorance. We are here to support everyone because everyone deserves to live their American story. Thank you so much. And special thanks to our moderators here who did an amazing, amazing job. Please, they give us hope for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roy. Thank you all for coming. It was a wonderful event today, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.